Good afternoon. How are you? So we're here to brief you today on the officer-involved shooting that occurred last night in the city of Providence. I'm also joined today by the Attorney General Peter Norona, the Colonel of the Rhode Island State Police Darnell Weaver, and Chief Stephen Lynch of the Barberville Police Department. At approximately 8 p.m. last night, an initial broadcast came in through Intercity, stating that a subject later identified as Michael Pinto, a 40-year-old male out of 234 Money Hill Road, Chepachet, Rhode Island, had fled from police and was wanted for shooting at a Barberville police officer. The broadcast, a short time later, was changed, stating that actually Barberville PD had shot at this individual for apparently attempting to ram one of their officers. With this information, and moments later, Providence police officer Sergeant Colon observed this vehicle coming off Route 10 and onto Dean Street in our city. The officers attempted to stop the vehicle. The operator, Mr. Pinto, then mounted the sidewalk and fled from Providence police officers operating in a reckless manner. This individual was then pursued by Providence police, and at the intersection of Dudley and Eddy Street, he was caught in traffic. Lieutenant Eugene Chin attempted to get this individual out of the vehicle, and it was at this point that this individual put the vehicle in reverse, striking the unmarked police vehicle of Sergeant Rampone, who was directly behind him, and also forcing Lieutenant Eugene Chin to let go of the operator to avoid any injuries. The operator, Mr. Pinto, was then able to maneuver on the sidewalk and again flee from officers. He then drove on Dudley Street towards Gay Street. Mr. Pinto at this point took a right onto Gay Street towards the area of the emergency entrance at Women and Infants Hospital, and again got caught in traffic. Mr. Pinto, in an attempt to flee from the officers, mounted the sidewalk in front of the hospital where a pedestrian nurse was standing. Providence police officers Sergeant Rampone and Sergeant Lopes came up on the vehicle. Sergeant Rampone behind the vehicle and Sergeant Lopes in front of the vehicle. I'd like to say that Sergeant Rampone is a 15-year veteran of the Providence Police Department, and Sergeant Lopes is a 9-year veteran of the Providence Police Department. Mr. Pinto at this point placed his vehicle in reverse, with Sergeant Rampone and the pedestrian nurse still on the sidewalk behind him. It is at this time that both Sergeant Rampone and Sergeant Lopes discharged their duty weapons. Officers were then able to remove Mr. Pinto and his juvenile teenage daughter from the vehicle. Pinto was taken into custody and immediately transported to Rhode Island Hospital by the officers on the scene to be treated for his critical injuries. Unfortunately, and my condolences go out to the family, we later learned that Mr. Pinto died at the hospital. We also learned that his juvenile daughter also sustained a gunshot wound to her leg. I will turn it over to Chief Steve Lynch of the Barberville Police Department for his brief update.
Thank you, Colonel. Good morning. Yesterday at approximately 7:32 p.m., a pursuit was initiated in the town of Barberville involving a wanted male subject, and the pursuit commenced at the Barberville-Gloucester line. The subject was wanted on active felony arrest warrants by both Gloucester and Barberville police for felony eluding stemming from a Thursday, the day before, pursuit initiated by Gloucester, joined in by Barberville, and terminated as the chase entered into the Smithfield area near Bryant College. Last night's pursuit went from Money Hill Road, which is Route 100, to Sherman Farm Road, which is Route 98, into Uxbridge, Massachusetts for a brief period of time. Uxbridge PD assisted in trying to apprehend Mr. Pinto. The pursuit continued from Sherman Farm Road to Route 146A to Route 146 South in North Smithfield. When it entered into the area of Pound Hill Road on Route 146 South in North Smithfield, Sergeant Henry Yakey, who is one of the two main officers involved in this pursuit, instructed officers to terminate the pursuit. At that point, officers discontinued the pursuit of Pinto, killing their lights and siren. As they continued on 146 South, Barberville police officers, Sergeant Henry Yakey and Officer Brett Simus and Officer Lucas Pompriant, came upon Pinto in his vehicle, stuck in traffic in the area of Anchor Subaru, 146 southbound at Sales Hill Road. At that point, officers attempted to box him in with their vehicles and arrest him, at which point Sergeant Yakey and Officer Simus got out of their vehicles, attempted to physically get him from the vehicle, and Pinto then drove his vehicle at Sergeant Henry Yakey. Yakey fires 2 rounds into the vehicle at that time. After the 2 rounds are discharged by Sergeant Yakey, Pinto continues to evade, strikes another Burrillville cruiser, and continues south on Route 146 south, and officers lose sight of him at that point. Sergeant Yakey was transported to Merriam Hospital, where he was treated for injuries resulting in this altercation. Officers on scene contacted their superiors, who in turn we enacted the Attorney General's protocol relative to use of deadly force, where State Police, the Attorney General's office, are now involved in the use of deadly force at the scene at Route 146 South on Sales Hill Road. At this point, I'll turn it over to all of us for any questions. Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Chief. So yeah, as the Chief stated, this was a joint investigation by the Attorney General's office. The protocol was enacted, the State Police and the Providence Police Department Internal Affairs, just as much as the Boroughville Police Department. So if you have any questions, this is the time to ask.
I have
Steve.
a question for Chief Lynch.
Yeah.
Could you touch on, so if we understand this properly, one of your officers fired at the suspect, but it went over the radio that it's possible that the suspect had fired on police, is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm not familiar, and we're still in the process of gathering all radio transmissions. I'm not familiar with that transmission and where that originated from, so I can't speak intelligently on that at this time.
Mr. Pinto is known to law enforcement, and if I have it correct, he has been arrested in the past.
Correct.
For possession of weapons as well, is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak because I don't have his criminal history right in front of us. We are familiar with him from some minor contacts within the town of Burrillville, and I'm also familiar with Gloucester, is quite familiar with him as well.
Could you just touch on the Thursday incident?
Sure.
That he was evading police on Thursday?
Sure. At about 3 o'clock p.m. on Thursday afternoon, Gloucester PD is set up on a traffic post, and they ID Pinto. They spot Pinto traveling in a manner that causes them to want to stop him for a motor vehicle violation. Pinto does not stop. That encounter takes place right at the Gloucester-Burrillville line, and the chase goes pretty much instantly into Burrillville, where our officers engage in the pursuit through somewhat the back roads of Burrillville, comes out onto Route 7, into North Smithfield, and then to Smithfield where it's terminated.
Chief, what was the maximum speeds by both your police department and the perpetrator? And at what point in time did they identify the presence of a minor child in the vehicle with him? And I guess the follow-up to that is, what is the protocol when there's a minor child identified?
Sure. Our people did not identify who was in the vehicle other than Pinto until the aftermath in Providence. Okay? The speeds in the chase on Thursday were in the ballpark of 65 to 70 on the back roads where the speed limits are 25 and 30.
And you would describe these, I've been on these roads, but you would describe these as rural, semi-country back roads. There's some beautiful
Yes, sir.
territory, but certainly not appropriate for that level of speed.
Yes, sir, correct.
Jefe, en español un poco lo que sucedió anoche aquí en la ciudad de Providence y que vino de otras ciudades y terminamos aquí con la muerte del sospechoso.
Yeah, so the question was, if I could please just explain in Spanish what occurred last night, what kind of incidents occurred, and how someone lost their life in the city. So ya anoche lo que pasó fue un incidente en el cual tuvimos una información del medio del radio de que un individuo había efectuado en la ciudad de Burrillville un incidente y potencialmente le había disparado a un policía. Eso cambió definitivamente y nos dijeron que verdaderamente le había tratado de pegarle a un oficial. Llegó a la ciudad de Providence, en la cual terminó en un área del hospital Women and Infants, y en ese hospital de Women and Infants esa persona se montó en la acera, trató de doblarse a los policías. un teniente trató de sacarlo del carro, no pudo, y entonces en ese momento, cuando llegó al home and infants en el emergency room, 2 oficiales del Departamento de Policía de Providence le dispararon. Desafortunadamente, mis condolencias para la familia, lo llevamos al hospital en el cual perdió su vida. Estamos en este momento investigando, es una investigación con la Policía del Estado, en la oficina del Attorney General's Office, y eso siempre es un protocolo que se enacta para esto. So.
Now that you mentioned the Attorney General, Peter, what is your office going to be doing at this moment?
Well, the office has been involved since last night, so whenever there's an incident like this, the office responds. In fact, we actually have a team of lawyers. It's a complicated matter, frankly. There are at least 4 or 5 separate incidents along the way that need to be reviewed, and so pursuant to the protocol, working with the team here, we'll be reviewing it. But our team was on site last night and spent a good deal of time overnight working on this matter with our partners in law enforcement.
Is the officer on paid leave right now?
So both of our Providence police officers right now are placed on administrative duty. So they're off the street until we conduct and finish our investigation.
How does the police going to help?
Per the Attorney General's protocol, the state police are brought in to assist with the investigation and anytime there is a deadly use of force. So we are working in conjunction with the Attorney General's office to investigate that.
Colonel, can I just ask?
Sure.
A vehicle can be used, is that characterized, it could be used as a deadly weapon?
Correct, yes.
So use of deadly force in certain situations would depend on how the vehicle is being used by the suspect?
Correct. And that will be determined during the course of the investigation.
Were there 2 children in the car or just 1?
There was a juvenile teenager in the vehicle, correct?
Not only with the spelling of the names, first and last names of the officers and which ones were involved in the shooting, but I also heard that the nurse was injured as well in the shooting.
So the nurse, correct, she was also taken to the hospital with injuries, and
From the shooting or from being hit by the vehicle?
from the incident that occurred. The vehicle on the sidewalk, the vehicle taking actions that operated that he did, and so yeah, she suffered injuries. Not confirmed about a shooting, no injuries from the vehicle and the actions of that vehicle and what caused after that. So,
And can you spell the names, first and last names of Sergeant Rampone and you said Lopes?
so Amanda, we can get you that afterwards if needed, but Rampone, R-A-M-P-O-N-E, and Lopes, L-O-P-E-S.
Chief, if you could explain to us, what is the protocol for breaking off a high-speed chase?
Right, sure. There's several factors that go into that evaluation. What's the level of traffic? What's the speed in play? What's the speed limit in play? What are the road conditions at the time relative to, is it raining, is it snowing, is it a clear? But level of traffic, mainly motor vehicle traffic and/or any pedestrian traffic. So those factors are in what's the pursuit for are all part of that evaluation that goes on in those moments by both the pursuing officers and the supervisor managing that shift at the time.
Is that a joint decision, or is that left up to your officers in the field?
The officer in the field does have the authority to terminate his or her own pursuit. Ultimately, the officer in charge has the responsibility to either terminate or allow the pursuit to continue.
Chief, what was the initial charge against Pinto?
What was he wanted for?
What was he wanted for?
Felony eluding.
Thursday. I'm sorry.
Felony eluding. He's wanted as a result of the chase on Thursday. Last night's chase, he's wanted on felony eluding arrest warrants from both Burrillville and Gloucester stemming from the Thursday incident.
And why were officers trying to stop him Thursday?
Gloucester started that chase in their community for a motor vehicle violation.
Do you know what the suspect is?
I'm sorry?
Do we know specifically what the motor vehicle charge was?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
We know what the suspect is?
One at a time.
No.
Chief, last night there was, or maybe the colonel will speak to, there was heavy activity on 146. Could you just touch on, was that in relation to, I believe it was even past the whole Subaru thing, but was there something going on
Sure.
146?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So there's the scene where Sergeant Yakey discharges the 2 rounds. That's 146 South at Sales Hill Road. Pinto flees that scene. our officers, when they're able to get back into their cruisers, attempt to, again, catch up to him. They lose sight of him, so they stop at a second point, 146 South at 295. So if you saw two separate scenes of heavy police presence, that's why.
Was a weapon found in the vehicle of the suspect? Or
I don't know that a search has been conducted at this point.
is it possible
That's part of the
he got
ongoing
rid of the
investigation.
weapon, like threw it out the window?
I don't know, I can't comment on that.
Is the Barville police officer fired his weapon also on paid leave, or?
Yes, he is.
And so, sorry, I got here a few minutes late. So that happened in your, right, in your super, you said, on
Yes.
146, and then the suspect was shot again in Providence, your limited instance? Is that what happened?
Correct.
Now, you guys know what Pinto did. Why you don't go to his house to pick her up before the chase?
I have time for 2 more questions, guys.
Yeah. Why you police officers didn't show up to his residence to pick him up?
Our officers were in the area of Pinto's residence last night when the chase ensued.
Chief, where the initial shots were fired on 146, is that North Smithfield?
Yes, sir.
Do you have an age, and he lives in Barville, the suspect?
He lives in Gloucester,
Gloucester. And then do you have an age?
40 years old. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.
Just one quick one. With the passing of Mr. Pinto, what happens now with the case? Is there a report drawn formally after the investigation, when will that be released to us?
So, consistent with the Attorney General's protocol on use of deadly force, the State Police, the Attorney General's Office, Providence Police, and Barville Police will conduct the investigation. From there, this matter will be presented, I'm sure, to a grand jury.
Well, possibly. I mean, let me address that if
Sure.
I could, Colonel. So the protocol envisions a number of paths depending on what the initial review discloses. And so it's possible it could be presented to a grand jury. It's also entirely possible that it won't be. I think what the target for us is going to be understanding what happened here at each of the 4 or 5 instances along the way. There is body camera footage that we're going to review, and as soon as the recipient witnesses have been identified and interviewed, I anticipate that footage will be released in the relatively short term, within a week to 10 days, and not more than that. And then the decision will be made once all of those witnesses have been identified, the ballistics have been analyzed, the car has been analyzed, there's a warrant for the car that is either being executed or will be. When all of that's put together, we'll decide whether there's a need to go further, but I don't think we should anticipate anything other than, right now, a review. There is no reason in my judgment, based on what I know today, to make this about the police officers and their conduct. I think what we need to do is understand what happened and then decide whether there's any additional steps that we need to take as a law enforcement matter.